Hey, welcome to another episode of the Not Scrum Dumb podcast. I'm your host, Adreanna Marshall, professional Scrum trainer, and that is my amazing host.
Grand Scrum Master Scott.
So, today we're going to be talking about one of the things that I feel is really difficult to measure for your team, and that's the team health. How do you actually quantify and measure that in a way that people can understand? And so, Scott's going to actually show us agility health, which is already up right now. Scott, take us through this, what this is, what this means, how this can help teams.
Yes, Andronna, we'll start from how we get to this point of the radar that you see on the board. This is a tool that some organizations use. I use this when I was at Bank of America and also Fidelity Investments. Every quarter or every 6 months, one environment was every quarter, the other environment was every 6 months. What would happen before we get to this here radar is there will be an anonymous survey sent out to everybody that's on your Scrum team, the developer, the product owner, the Scrum Master. Everybody will vote on a bunch of questions based upon these categories. So a category could be clarity. Now it's going to ask you some questions about vision and purpose, goals and outcomes, the roadmap, monthly. You get the idea. Going to go through the same thing through performance. They're going to ask a bunch of questions in that survey about performance in these categories. Same thing with leadership. Same thing with the culture, the foundation. Now, when that survey is over, all that information, that data is going to be tabulated to this radar. Now, as we look at the radar, we have some different things here in the inner wheel and the outer wheel. We're just going to look at it at a high level overview. So we look 25%, 50%, 75%. Of course, we want to be at 100% in each of these categories. So think of this as a Likert scale. On a scale from 1 to 5, how will we rate ourselves in this category? So think of it that way. This is just using percentages. Okay. Now, what's going to happen after this point? We're going to have a retrospective specifically on this here radar, typically some other Scrum Master from some other team, so that he or she can have an unbiased approach. We'll actually come and go over the results of this radar for my team, for your team. Another Scrum Master is going to come in and do this. Now, what he or she is going to do is go through and look at the category of performance and items that, let's say, the company's threshold is 50% across the board. We want to be at or above 50%.
All right, Scott. So that's great. Now we know what it is, but can you tell me how a company determines what they need to improve? Because I see a lot of varying things. You could probably pick a bunch of these to improve. Nothing's at 100%. So, how does a company determine what they should focus on?
That's already predetermined before we get to the Scrum team level. I try to keep it as simple as possible. So I want you to think about 4 categories. So 4 categories of, let's say, the agile maturity of a team. Level 1 will be crawl level. Now, what would be some of the things in the crawl level? Okay, this team is brand new to Scrum and Agile. Do they have a product owner? Do they have a Scrum Master? Do they have enough developers to do the job? So that would be a crawl level score. Then the next score would be walk. So looking at this graph, walk would be, let's say, 50%. This would be like a new team getting started. And then the third level would be run. Run would be about 75%. So run would be like you got all the agile manifesto values and principles in place. You look at the Scrum guide, you got all those elements in place, and the Scrum team is doing it as according to the Scrum guide. And then fly is now we have responsibility. We helping other teams out. We getting stuff out the door quick, fast, in a hurry. We not dependent upon, let's say, having a quarterly or monthly release. We are delivering value every sprint. So that would be kind of like the fly level. That would be the nirvana, if you will. Does that help, Andrana?
Yeah, how does that relate to this? So I see we have 25, 50, 75, but none of it
Mhm.
says if we're crawling. So how do we connect those 2?
Designation is already predetermined before we get to this chart. So let's just say for this example, 25% equals a crawl level Scrum team, according to this agility chart. If we had crawled today in this category, our goal would be by the time we have this next survey is to get to walk. If we had walked, the next goal would be to get to run. Or in this case, let's just use the numbers. If we had 25%, the next goal would be to get to 50%. If we had 50%, the next goal will be to get to 75%. Okay. So those are all predetermined and what we're trying to achieve as a result of doing these surveys. Does that help, Andrea?
Yeah, that makes total sense. That's really awesome. So let's say in this example, we have a few 25s. Does
Okay.
because everyone that's watching, we're scrum masters. How do we help our team based on that? So we understand the crawl levels 20, 50, 75. That, how they relate to each other. How
Mhm.
do we as scrum masters act upon this information that we have?
Okay, so let's say our company's threshold, just for the sake of this example, is 50. The company wants everybody with this survey to be at a level 50, whatever that 50 equates to in your environment. So the facilitating Scrum Master, not me, because it's my team, definitely going to call this block out because it's lower than 50. Now, what that person is going to do, that person is going to have access to the actual survey questions that everybody voted on. And we're going to go specifically over the survey question. Say, look, we scored low on this question. First of all, do you understand what the survey question is asking? And in some cases, that's the problem. If we scored low on a category, it could be that most of the people did not understand the survey question, or they thought it was not applicable to them and they didn't answer. So we clarified as best as possible to make sure that this data is accurate by asking those type of questions. If it is accurate, we feel this way, that we want to have a discussion about it. It feels just like a retrospective for the Scrum team. Hey, we low in this category. What can we do about it? And that's what we're going to decide talking about this survey and the results of the survey. We're going to write down some action items. We're going to put that in our continuous improvement product backlog. And in this category of team, that would be our goal as a Scrum team to complete this by the end of this survey period. So if we're doing a quarterly survey, we would have to have that done before the next survey come around and implement it to try and figure out how we're going to improve this score based upon that conversation we're having today. Does that help? What other questions you beautiful question.
Yeah, and I think that all makes sense. Now, one of the things that everybody complains about is we do this survey once and sometimes we forget about it or we never really check again anytime soon. And it seems like it's there to tell leadership X, Y, and Z, and nothing really ever happens. So, how often do we do this type of survey?
Again, I have 2 experiences in using this in 2 different environments. One environment did it every quarter. I think every quarter is too much. The other environment I was in was once every 6 months. I think once every 6 months is a good time because this is a massive feat. Normally, this is done organizational wide, and you have a lot of scrum teams. It's a lot of coordination. It's a lot of organization to get this done. It's probably going to take us a month just to get to this point of getting this data on the radar, depending upon what organization you're
Everyone might not be able to do something this big, but what do you
in.
think a potential good place to start if you're a scrum master and your organization may not approve something like this? How do you think a scrum master should get started with understanding the health of their team and maybe taking some elements of this?
That's a beautiful question, Adriana. The first thing I did before I even knew about this radar was I Googled, hey, team survey. Let's say this here radar popped up on my screen after I did a search. What am I going to do is use this as a template. I'm looking at all these different categories. Okay, cool. Clarity. Do I need to be concerned about clarity on my team? Yes, no. If it's no, I don't need to worry about that. Foundation. I might would change this stuff, but I will use this as a template to give me some ideas to create my own survey, my own graph, using this as a template if the organization didn't have something like this. I think it's great to have some type of team assessment so that you can know where you are and compare that to where it is you want to go. I think that's important. Do you have to use this tool? No. I think this is a great tool to kind of give you some preliminary things and take it to the team. Hey, team, I jot down some ideas about what's important to us. What do y'all think is important for us to track? And I will put that on the wheel. I will give my preliminary thoughts and take it to the team to add to it, subtract to it, have a conversation about it because that's what it's all about. Having that conversation and tracking the things that are important to the team that we think is important. Your thoughts, Andriana?
I think that's a great point. You can do surveys throughout in very small amounts. So if you want to check on the performance, you can do something geared to that without having to do a massive undertaking. You can get a few questions from this as well as other things, but you don't necessarily have to do it all at once. Like here, you could start off really small, asking a few different questions and trying to get an understanding and building on that. So I think that's a really great suggestion. So one organization that I've worked for did a one question survey every day. So every
One
day you
question
just get one
survey. Really?
question,
Wow.
one
That's
question,
interesting.
and they'll yeah, and it's really easy to do though. So you don't really think that like I've done 5
Right.
days a
Right.
week, 52 weeks or whatever. You don't really think about the amount of questions that you've answered. And it gets
Mm,
rolled up. I think it gets rolled up on a monthly basis. So they take the previous month and they roll it up and they have it categorized, but you don't really have to see the category. You don't really have to do this hour undertaking. It's about
mhm.
5 minutes at best. Sometimes it's literally 30 seconds. It's kinda nice doing something like that, and it kinda gives a little bit
I
more of
never
like a
thought of that. That's
real-time
dope.
picture. I mean,
Of this survey
sometimes
here.
it's an undertaking, and so I've done like the yearly ones where we do a review and the whole team's involved and some things improve, some things don't. I really like the daily ones. That gets rolled up to your manager. They have real-time data where they can help resolve
Mhm,
these
mhm.
issues much faster, so I really like that one. Not
I'm
very
about to try
common
that.
though.
I've never used that, never even thought of that. I like that, so I'm gonna benchmark that from you.
I'm telling you, it's so easy to do. I really don't even think about it. Sometimes it's as simple as 30 seconds because I know how I feel about this. Sometimes I'll ask like maybe a follow-up question or two, but minute a day.
It's gonna take a person at least 30 minutes, maybe an hour and a half, depending upon how comprehensive this survey is, to do something like this, and to your point, the biggest complaint I get with my Scrum team when it comes to doing something on this scale, "Oh my god, I don't have time for that." I like what you said in terms of giving a survey question a day. That's nugget enough to really get that real time. I'm definitely gonna experiment with that.
All right. Thanks for watching another episode of the Not Scrum Dumb podcast. If you made it to the end, that means you have an attention span greater than a goldfish.
Be legendary, everyone, but not Scrum Dumb. See you in the next episode.